This is all about positivities. It's the station where you get to and will tell you the talks. So it doesn't matter where you're coming from, what has gotten to you, the negativities that have come all day, could even be through the week. When you come here on Souq News, you see programming that will make you think positively and you have a solution. Whether you like it or not, we'll communicate. Now, for Souq Pulse, you should know us by now. We don't keep quiet. We never stop talking. And we tell you the same thing. Keep talking. So it doesn't matter what the economy is saying in your country. It doesn't matter what your neighbors are trading. It doesn't matter what policies are affecting you from within, from without. It doesn't matter what loans are holding you down, whether you're paying or not paying. It doesn't matter what the GDP is. It doesn't matter what business is. We talk about it. Every single one of them. From industries to hospitals to agri to tourism to arms to conflict. Does it affect productivity? Then we can talk about it. We argue sometimes, mind you. I also encourage you to do the same. But in all this, it's all geared towards getting every one of us productive. So we talk. My name is Chooks, John Rogers Chooks, and it's a beautiful day. I must tell you, it's a very beautiful day in Lagos, Nigeria. For those still wondering, this is the most populous black nation on earth. The best. You can take that to the bank. When we return, we will open up the topic of discussion and I'll get to introduce my guest to you. This concerns every one of us. We have to get productive. We'll get a bit angry about it today. It doesn't matter. We might laugh, we might smile, but hey, we will talk. Don't go anywhere. Souq Pulse will be right back. Welcome back. It's Souq Pulse. And today we are looking at what's happening across Asia and the West. It's been a very beautiful drama in the last few days. So if you look at their trade, you hear all manner of headlines, all manner of rhetorics coming from one side. Then the other side answering them by increasing production. Okay, let me break it down. 2 days ago, Canada, for one, slammed 100% tariff on EV vehicles coming from China. Now, before that, the US have done the same. Between these two, EU have also done the same. Everybody is raising tariff. Now, it's not just on EV vehicles. There are some other products coming from Asia too. And this particular tariff war has been going on. Everybody protecting their own. Now, we on this side of the divide, we are asking ourselves, okay, what exactly is playing out here? And that is what we want to talk about today. The tariff war. Can Africa play? Someone will say, what are we producing? Good. What are we exporting? Good. What are we importing? Good. Now you get to understand it. Why are there tariffs in the first place? Okay, generate revenue for your country, good and fine. Protect industries, good and fine. Protect consumers, good and fine. We'll talk through every one of this and ask ourselves direct questions. What exactly is stopping us from getting all these sectors that tariff get to play active in Africa? And there's no other person to do justice to this than our own Leonard. Is a leader in the house. And he's also a commentator, not just within here, outside Africa and within Africa, and a teacher of teachers. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please join me as I welcome to Souq Pulse again, Mr. Sam Orovwuje. Sir, you're welcome to Souq Pulse.
Good evening, Chooks. My pleasure to be here, as always.
You're welcome. Again. Now, for those wondering, the good evening is good evening in Nigeria. Now, we are heading straight. Now, tariff, just like I said, it could be to generate revenue, but whatever it is that money, if you try to call it money, duty paid for importing or exporting goods. It depends on where you decide to drop it. Now, a lot of countries use it to generate revenue. Beautiful. I'm going to read out some statistics for two major countries as it concerns us in this particular discussion. Now, one way government deals with helping local industries is to make sure that what they are importing, if it's within their borders, don't drown their own. And that's what you see playing out within Asia and the West. Also, they are also going beyond that, which Mr. Sam will give us a light in. He was not just giving us the light, he's going to completely throw it open because we will ask those particular questions. Let's start this way, right from the basics. Is tariff the best means of promoting and protecting domestic industries?
Thank you very much indeed. First and foremost, we must put the concept of protectionism in international trade as a major element that countries or nations use to protect their local industry in order to protect some manufacturing that take place in the country. So you need to protect your domestic trade. Therefore, tariff is one of the mechanisms you use in protecting international trade.
One of the mechanisms?
Yeah, one of the mechanisms.
Is it a major one?
To a very large extent, depending on the trade strategy that the country or the nation want to use at a particular point in time. So maybe as we progress the conversation, we'll be able to speak to some element of the mechanism or measures you use in protecting industries, particularly local industries, so that you don't get into the realm of what the economists call a dumping nation, where people bring sometimes substandard products and put them into a particular country, and it destroy the local manufacturing industry, as it were. So it's just one of the mechanisms. If you expand the conversation in terms of principles and policies of trade, not just even international trade, then tariff is one of the mechanisms you use for protecting industries.
One of the mechanisms, protecting industries. Okay, let's hold on to these two premises. Now let's bring it a bit local, because everything we are talking about tariff, we're looking at Africa and asking ourselves, okay, Africa, how exactly are we playing? To what extent can tariff exert political leverage when it comes to country against country? Take an example. Buhari, during Buhari's regime, for those wondering, Buhari is the past president before our present president. There was a ban on importation of rice. There was a ban on some borders for some cars to, okay, if you're bringing it, tariff was raised. Now, these were our own direct neighbors: Benin, Niger, Togo, Ghana. To what extent is tariff used as a political leverage?
No, I won't say from the perspective of political economy, which is political leveraging, as you properly put it. What is key, in my view, is that country has a responsibility to protect its border, first and foremost, whatever comes into a particular nation. So what the Buhari administration did was to increase the tariff to protect the local production of rice in particular, because he had a very robust policy in terms of rice production. So those tariffs were originally meant to protect that particular sector, if you like, in a way.
If I like, or if he likes?
What I mean, if you like, I'm using it in terms of the phrase, appropriate phrase.
Okay.
When you say if you like, that means there are other ways to put it. So I'm saying that that tariff that was imposed, even from the neighboring country, even taking cognizance of the ECOWAS Treaty and Protocol,
which was in effect at that particular point in time.
Yeah, what I mean, yes, no, there are some elements even within that protocol.
Okay.
Maybe as we progress, we can speak to specific things. There are always certain elements in this agreement where there's a particular clause where even within the economic union.
Okay, you put yourself first.
Yes, there are certain things within the framework that protect the local country, even though we have a commonality of interest in terms of the economic union, that ECOWAS, as a treaty that's between Nigeria up to Senegal, has some semblance of a trade relationship.
Okay, but was it That particular action, was it tailored towards political leverage, or was it more of trade?
Well, it's difficult to make a definitive statement because one is not in the corridor of power when that policy
Okay, now,
was put in place. But for me, essentially, was meant to protect Nigerian local industry.
okay, now
So
let's
whether,
look at Nigerian local industry, specifically rice production. Rice, cheaper rice was coming in from Benin, still coming in from Benin, Cotonou to be precise, and also from the borders of the north. Now, the north and the middle belt regions of Nigeria produce the highest amount of rice. As we speak, that rice industry has not done very good, except for what is happening recently from Niger State and their neighbors. During that particular regime, that particular ban and tariff on rice didn't yield much fruit. So was it political leverage or it was something else?
I think I won't consider it as a political leveraging. I consider it more from the perspective of a failure of the border police to do the needful, where a government policy was in place, and smuggling, which is a sabotage to economic prosperity of a particular country, and in this case, Nigeria was put in a jeopardy in the sense that the border policing mechanism that's supposed to support that policy framework couldn't do the needful at that particular point in time. And that's why you had smuggling that threatened the existential survival of local industry. And in this case, we're talking about the rice revolution, as it was called during the Buhari regime.
Rice revolution. Okay, now let's turn that table a bit too. Now, of recent, we had a military, I won't call them juntas, military action, coup that happened Mali, brothers, Burkina Faso, other Francophone countries, our neighbors also. Now, we also had this particular kind of issue. The present administration almost shut down the borders for goods leaving Nigeria to Niger Republic. Now, that put a whole strong hold on food and some other products, petroleum product also, coming into that particular place, which also made them to try and say, okay, good, we are going to shut down our airspace. Everybody was pulling their own powers. So was that political leverage?
No, if you look at the scenario that played out in the country that is popularly called the Sahel region, particularly from Niger, Burkina Faso, and that Axis, I think some of the decisions that inform the policy framework at that particular point in time were more of security concern.
Security for us or security for them?
No, security concern first and foremost for Nigeria, in the sense that that infraction, particularly from the young men who took power in those regions, there was a need to beef up security at the border post. So within that understanding, it was essentially done to protect the interests of Nigeria.
It was done to protect the interest of Nigeria, you say. Now, these are not just our neighbors. They are our African brothers. It's just the boundary that was created somewhere in Germany that is still dividing us. Now, let's turn this table around again and bring it back to where it was. Now, let's look at we and the West, we and Asia, just like what is happening between Asia and the West. Now, is tariff a good policy when it comes to leveraging, or is it selfish when it comes to putting countries first?
Whatever mirror you use in viewing a tariff, tariff
for products, not for revenue.
No, whatever mechanism or whatever way you look at tariff is a mechanism in international trade. And in international trade, what favors a particular nation is what they would do in preservation of their national interests.
What favors a particular nation?
Yes.
Now, I like where we started and I like where we are. Let's now ask ourselves, African leaders, are they thinking in light of every single enlightenment you've dropped on this table when we started this particular program?
Yeah, the point is that the colonial boundaries is difficult to erase because of the psychological um, imperative of how the colonial masters have schooled us, and those geographical line, artificial boundaries that were created in 1884, 1885 at the Berlin Conference remain a very difficult wound in terms of the African nationalism or the new nationalism, as you might call it, where people think first and foremost as Lusophone, Anglophone, and Francophone. So these lines have continued to be a difficult line, particularly in the areas of trade, in the area of interest, particularly with the West, the global North, and the global South. So these challenges will continue to affect the way we trade in Africa. But again, the leadership must find a way to move away from these various colonial configurations that have constantly put African down in the last 60 to 60 something years of political independence. So, but if you look at it from the perspective of global trade, international trade, even continental trade, we have the Continental Free Trade Agreement that was supposed to leapfrog Africa in terms of inter-African trade. But this policy has been in place almost 5 years. Though we have some level of development in terms of our ability to trade among ourselves, but the greater impediment is still is as a result of these colonial lines in terms of geography. But then African leader must look inward to see how the 54 African countries that make up the AU can rework this mechanism and see how they can trade freely without necessarily putting trade barriers. So tariff is equally considered as a trade barrier sometimes in terms of the control mechanism to protect your industry, which is simply called protectionism, which is a mechanism in international trade. So once those elements there, they continue to be part of the political economy, part of the Western conspiracy that affects Africa. But again, not only Africa, the trade war has moved away even between China and America, and essentially these two countries are fighting for dominance in the international arena, political dominance, economic dominance, trade dominance, and whatever kind of dominance within the international system. And this will continue to play for a very long time. So protectionism, political economy, leadership will continue to be the major overlapping driver when you make decisions, when you're talking about tariff, whether you want to protect local industry, and what a kind of trade war that country want to involve themselves in.
Okay. I like that last part. Whatever trade war the country want to involve themselves in. But just like you said, countries put themselves first, our citizens first, provide for our industries first, generate revenue first. Then we become friends. We buy, we sell. What do I need? I buy from you. What do you need? You buy from me. Now, for Africa, if we can bring down these borders, just like you said, you call them colonial boundaries. For some countries, it's well over 60 years that the colonial masters left. Why have we not left those boundaries? I'm not expecting an answer though. For some countries, they still have their central bank domiciled somewhere in France. That needs some flogging to make people wake up. Now let's start asking ourselves direct questions. Africa is the headquarters of raw materials, primary products, be it agri product, be it natural products, be it raw materials, Africa is the headquarters. At what point in time, or is it remotely possible that Africa can align together and say, if you need our product, let's start bargaining? If US can tell their next neighbor and say, we are not giving you steel because you're also producing steel, so let there be a tariff agreement between we and you. I'm talking about UK. So what stops Africa from coming together and say, good, if you need our bauxite, let's rebargain. If you need our radioactive material, let's rebargain. If you need our crude oil, let's rebargain. And not just, we need money, take, give us loan, take. Can't Africa and its leaders wake up?
Yes, there's a need for African leaders to wake up. Permit me to use this word, from their slumber in terms of leadership. But then it's far greater than that. The colonial engineering will continue to be a major factor.
When are we going to
No, just
let
a
the
moment.
colonial engineering
No, just a
leave?
moment. No, just a moment. Once the politics of divide and rule that has taken firm roots,
Who's dividing, who's ruling?
yeah, that's the conspiracy that we've not been able to attend to. And this conspiracy essentially is driven by those colonial boundaries that we spoke about earlier in this conversation. Until African leaders are able to remove these lenses where they see themselves first and foremost as French African countries, Portuguese African countries, English African countries, whatever configuration that we currently have, it will be very, very difficult to push an agenda. It has taken about 5 years to be able to drive the process of inter and intra-African trade with a very robust trade mechanism that was put in place called the African Continental Free Trade Area or Free Trade Agreement that was supposed to leapfrog in terms of trade among African countries. But this is almost 5 years over. This very robust policy initiative, where even if you trade between South Africa and Nigeria, for example, you are paid in the local currency. But then most leaders still pay lip services to some of these basic principles that were supposed to enhance our trade. So why you put stiffer tariff from countries that don't have a direct relationship with you and free yourself as an African country so that we can trade among ourselves with a view to bringing economic prosperity to Africans. So the issue of tariff is an aspect of international trade warfare that can be used by any nation. So if I got your question correctly, you're saying to what extent can Africa use tariffs in terms of trade mechanism to control what comes in here. So
And what goes out?
what goes out to a very large extent is beneficial. So if
Yes.
you're able to push products out, you
Yes.
earn foreign.
Remember what happened in our neighboring country, Niger Republic?
Yeah.
Yes, their radioactive material all of a sudden jumped well over 500% when they said, no, you can't take it at this price. If you want it, you take it at our own price.
Yeah, that's a different point. If
That's
you're talking about price,
what is going
the
out.
way you're talking about competitiveness and pricing, then that is a different question entirely. To what extent are we competitive in the
But
global?
that was raw materials, some specific raw materials that are majorly found.
No, that's
in this
primary
place.
products.
Okay,
The
primary
argument has
product.
always been, rather than taking these products out as primary products for the West to develop and come back to us. For example, let's take cocoa, for example. Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, they are the major producer of cocoa in Africa. But then Holland, that does not have a tree that is planted in the backyard, now process the cocoa and sell them to us as chocolates. And when you do the value addition, you are paying higher, and they're taking these products as a lower level. So the point, if I got you correctly, is that African should find a way of saying, sorry, we won't sell our products to you unless you bring this manufacturing company into our doorstep, so that as you are extracting these primary products, you are refining the products. So in terms of economic of scale, then we have that advantage.
You know, that could also be difficult.
No, the point is that it's not going to come in one day.
Yes, but now this can come in one day.
No, economic nationalism.
If Ghana, Cameroon,
No.
Cote d'Ivoire,
What I'm
part
saying
of
is that
Nigeria say we won't sell cocoa
you must
to
understand the
you
international.
except you buy at this price.
No. You must understand international conspiracy between the West. No, just a moment.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
The conspiracy is
Your
there.
level-
Why can't
no,
Africa
your
also
level of
bond together?
Your level of industrial development
Okay,
or knowledge deployment.
but is that not what they've used against us for
Yes,
20 years?
but then you don't
They
have
tell
the
us this,
architecture.
they
No,
tell us
you don't have the architecture.
who is going to build it.
Is you.
Good.
That's going to build it. But the point I'm making is that for you to be able to fight
Ghana,
an entrenched power relation structure.
Ghana cocoa
Just a
issue
moment.
is still there. It's in the news in the last few weeks.
Yes.
A lot of the money for the cocoa processing and even the
gold
planting
the gold
is coming
in the
from
news. Yes,
outside.
yes.
So they will determine the price of the cocoa even before they even ask about processing the product in the first place.
Correct.
So why can't African countries on
You
their
need
own
that
say
leadership.
no?
You need to break away from the apron string of the Western, permit my word, and I think it's not too bad for television, the Western buccaneers that have held us to a very large extent that we can't even think outside the box in terms of the way. No, it will be there, or to that international global architecture, even of the UN system.
They don't need to.
They
don't need to accept you,
No, the point is this.
and they won't
No,
accept
the
you.
point is, if you want to do that, you must have the courage, like what China did at a particular point in time when they closed their door to the West. So you can recalibrate your own architecture.
And China survived.
And China survived.
They didn't die.
No, they didn't die, but then they had a collective population, as it were, that was able to drive that process. So we, Africa as a collective, is almost in that level of population, over 1.4 billion people, if you put the 54 countries that make up Africa. So it's almost at that population level, but we don't have a centralized political architecture like what you have in China that was able to close China to the West for some time, and they look inward, and they were able to develop their economy. And over the last 10 years, China has taken over 50 million people from poverty. So from that perspective, therefore, if Africa must be able to stand its ground in the international arena in terms of trade, therefore, we must look inward. And some of these instruments, like the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that we already have, we must find a way to make it work. Because if we trade among ourselves, this pressure that comes from the West, looking for our primary products, in my view, will be reduced over a period of time.
Okay, I agree with you on that. Now, it also might be difficult for Africa to bond as one, but there are also several blocks within Africa. If those blocks can bond as one, we are as good as going. West Africa, East Africa, South Africa. The North is almost good. So that they're collecting a lot of loans right now. If West Africa can bond as one, what will break them? I bring my goods to the market.
No,
it's
like
the price I put on my goods you buy. If you don't want to buy it, no problem. But for us to do that, that means we have to get productive and be able to feed our own people.
Yeah, the point is, if you are not self-sufficient as a nation, it's always difficult to promote certain policies. So the point here is that we still go back to that configuration, that we're not making excuses. From Nigeria, and you want to travel up to Senegal, when you move from one aspect, the configuration changes. So if you move into Dakar, for example, as soon as you arrive at the airport, there's a language barrier, which becomes an impediment even to trade. Even the way you are treated, even though you have a common economic union, the ECOWAS, though you have the ECOWAS travel certificate that enables you to move in for 90 days without necessarily having a visa requirement. But then you're treated differently when you move in, even from the next, you drive beyond Cotonou, the border between Cotonou and Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, that's Lomé, Togo, you move in, the configuration changes, even though two of them are French-speaking African countries, and you get to the Aflao border, and you're moving from the French-speaking country to Ghana, on the other hand, where they even have common borders between the border town of Lomé and that of, they speak some common language, some on the other side, some on this other side. So the point I'm trying to drive at is that these various elements equally act as a barrier that will make a true cooperation. When those leaders came up in 1976 to put this policy framework in place, their vision that some years after that treaty, then we can do good businesses. But once you cross over to the other side, there's a high level of issues. Let's take this for example. Nigeria produces a lot of yam, but the percentage of export of yam to Canada, to the US, and the UK does not really thrive well, but most of our yams are taken out from Nigeria, taken to Ghana, repackaged in Ghana, and the Ghana packaging meets up with the AGUA requirement, which will time out hopefully by next year or 2026.
Same yam from
Yes,
Nigeria.
same yam that was put in place by Ben Clinton. So if you look at some of this mechanism, even within the economic union, there's even a problem in furthering. So you take yam at a cheaper level to Ghana. Ghana is able to package it and export it at a higher level. So we must look inward, even as a country. What are we not even doing right? How can we remain competitive, first and foremost as a nation, before we even look at the economic union that has brought us together with that ECOWAS treaty?
Okay. We must look inwards first before we start looking out and start firing those tariffs. Hey, don't go anywhere. We are going to go on a very short break. When we return, we will take tariff and break it down into different stages why there should be tariff in the first place. Advantages, disadvantages of the tariff, what it brings. Then we will end the show at this level. But hey, don't go anywhere. Souq Pulse will be right back. Yes, welcome back. It's still Souq Pulse. My name is Chooks, John Rogers Chooks. We've been talking about tariff wars, and we're asking ourselves, hey, can Africa play? Can we really play? We have Mr. Sam Orovwuje here, and he's been doing justice to this. We're asking ourselves, aside revenue, aside trade wars, aside protection, is Africa really seeing what is happening between Asia and the West and asking ourselves real questions? And we are getting there. Now, let's look at revenue. 2023, Africa had some revenue. Yeah, that's from different countries. Let's talk about Nigeria. Nigerian customs came in with 2.13 billion. Some will say, okay, We tried.
Billion or trillion?
$billion. Now, for those wondering billion or trillion, if we look at that particular money, it's not 20% of our budget. Now, also mind you that the agency themselves will also take part to also fund their services. We are not trying to make comparison. In the same fiscal year, the US made over $100 billion custom service only, to be specific, a particular area, custom service only. We are not comparing. Now, they are more productive than we are. But now, this is majorly products coming into the country. Now, mind you, we import most of what we use. We import more than we export. The major things we export are raw materials. So, sir, this is coming back. Looking at the amount of waivers coming into this particular sector, we are talking about revenue now. The head of customs said that they made a projection of making 2 times this amount, but thanks to waivers, they can't hit this. A lot of these waivers are also waivers for things that are imported, things that we might not even need as a nation, but because of our taste for imported and luxury items. How can we shore up our revenue for tariff for imported products?
First and foremost, what is the level of competitiveness of what you do, even within your domestic environment? Those are very critical elements before you can talk about how you can shore up tariff. So if your productive base is weak, therefore it's difficult for you to be able to shore up your tariff. Therefore, the kind of backward integration strategy that were put in place in the 80s up to the early 90s, up to 2000s and beyond. These strategies don't work because
But we're having a whole lot of import,
that's
tariff from those imports.
no. The
waivers on some of those
the
imports.
point I'm making is
Cronies of government officials
once you
getting
have
things in free.
No, I'm trying to build up a point for this. I don't just want to answer that question. Is your productive base that can help you shore up the kind of tariff that you can put in place?
Import revenue tariff.
Hold on. If your productive base is okay,
Okay.
why would you be making import waivers?
But this is where we are right now.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. So, yeah, granting waivers because you don't really have a base. Some of the things you are not supposed to import, you are bringing them in first and foremost. We're not even talking about waivers first and foremost because that productive base is not there. Therefore, all kinds of mechanism based on political leadership, particularly those who advise the government on what kind of policy option that the government should do in certain. So, for example, to support some industry, you don't produce machineries, plants and machineries. So, even the local industries that are here are struggling. So, you want to take a product, for example, from Dangote refinery to manufacture sacks or jute bags, as the case may be. But then you don't have the woven machines that you need to produce these bags
So you
for
call,
your local industry.
you call India.
So I don't want to mention a particular country in this regard.
You call India.
Yeah, you now
And grant them waiver.
yes, you now grant waivers
Okay.
so that you're able to even get the machines that have been used elsewhere that are even be in an obsolescence stage.
Is it possible that when those waivers are granted and whoever gets those particular waivers and bringing these machineries into this country, when they produce, they reduce the price of their product based on the waivers granted to them? Because we don't get to see that part or hear anything about that part of it.
Well, I cannot speak to that because I don't operate within that sector, so I don't have information. So
Okay.
I don't want to be in the realm of speculation.
Let's also run protecting domestic consumers. Another issue, another major reason for tariffs. To what extent is African nations enforcing this? Typical example, we see petroleum products brought into the country. Some have some percentage of lead, some have a high percentage of sulfur. Same thing with paint. Same thing with some food material. Same thing with some. We saw tinted milk in on African shelves. To what extent is Africa and her leaders and her vigilante making sure that this product coming from places where regulation is not much coming into Africa?
Well, again, we'll go back to the earlier submission that I've made. Number one, if you don't have a productive base that can sustain your economy, every kinds of materials will come in. Two, if you have an ostentatious mindset where everything that comes from elsewhere is consumed in your environment, then your local industry will suffer. But we come to this realization that when you patronize imported items, the likelihood is that you are supporting the other country and employment for those people who are bringing product into your environment. So again, that goes back to us as African, as a collective. Then in addition to that, the leadership question. So what you were able to resolve these various questions in Africa, then the idea of being able to reduce the initiative for imported item might be a difficult journey.
Okay. While that is a difficult journey, let's look at protecting nations' interests via tariffs. Now, we see this playing out directly between the West and Asia. Every single week, there is always a news, be it steel, be it EVs, be it telecommunication materials, be it 5G, be it the race to the moon, be it arms. We see this week in, week out. Now, Africa, we are not as productive as we want to be. Now, we are also import dependent. Now, we are asking ourselves, how can we deal with national interest when we, just like you said, we need to get productive and we are depending on imports? Is this not affecting our ability to stand on our feet strong and say no?
That's a challenge that we'll continue to speak to such a time where even Africans as a collective, all of us, are able to change their mindset in terms of what we consume, in terms of what we patronize in the global trade. On the other hand, what kind of policy framework do African leaders put in place to serve as a disincentive to dumping goods on our soil? So if we constantly able to re-engineer those processes, then the conversation in the nearest future might change in a way that we'll be able to compete globally. But like some of the factors that we mentioned earlier, if they are not addressed, then this idea of using tariff as a mechanism in Africa will just be a mirage.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Sam, for coming on Souq Pulse.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I look forward to the day where we'll be having this kind of conversation again and we'll see in the headlines, Africa has put this tariff on this product or on that product coming in from China or from US or from UK. I look forward to seeing those kind of headlines.
It's a work in progress. We may be moving slowly as African, and I'm sure once these various policy framework that the African Union has put in place to safeguard African national interests, particularly in terms of trade, once those things are put in place and we have the will, I don't want to use the word political will, to drive those processes, then someday, somehow, we'll get to a level where African can beat its chest that we're competing globally and we're able to place a tariff and determine what comes in and what does not come this way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sam. Now, to everyone that is out there, remember there is no other Africa. It doesn't matter how far you go or how fast you think you're going. It doesn't matter what space you occupy. It doesn't matter whose country you are right now. Africa must rise. And it's me, it's you, it's our responsibility to get that done. It's also our responsibility to keep talking. So it doesn't matter who your leaders are, who you've put up in your glass houses. We must keep talking to them. We must engage them. There's no excuse. And lastly, we must get productive. Everybody must get up and count. Get your hands dirty. And let's get Africa moving. We've gone past the era of excuses. This is Souq Pulse, and we say do not keep quiet. We'll do this again tomorrow. But before then, have yourself a very beautiful evening. And remember, love your neighbor as yourself. Bye.